All right, let's dive right in. Today we're tackling one of the most important philosophical works of the 20th century, Albert Camus' The Myth of Sisyphus. Now, I know it can sound a bit heavy, but it's actually a really powerful, and I'd even say life-affirming look at what it means to live in a world that doesn't just hand us meaning on a silver platter. And really, it all boils down to one incredibly stark question.
Wow, so Camus does not pull any punches, does he? He kicks off his entire essay with this line, and he's not just trying to be edgy. He's setting the stakes as high as they can possibly go. He's saying, look, forget all the abstract stuff for a minute. The first, and really the only question that matters is this. When you're staring into the void of a meaningless universe, do you check out or do you decide to live anyway?
So to see how he gets to his answer, here's our roadmap. First, we're going to dig into why he thinks this is the only question that matters. Then, we'll break down his big idea, the absurd. After that, we'll look at what he calls the great escape, and finally, we'll get to his prescription for living a life of revolt, freedom, and passion.
Okay, so first up, the only serious question. Why does this single question get top billing over everything else? Well, for Camus, it's pretty simple. Your answer to this question, it determines everything else that comes after. I mean, before you can figure out how to live or what to believe in, you got to first decide if you're going to live at all. It's the one judgment that comes before any other action.
And think about it this way. Camus brings up Galileo, who had this world-changing scientific truth, right? But the second his life was on the line, he took it back. And yet, every single day, people choose to end their lives over a feeling, over an idea about whether it's all worth it. And that shows you something wild. The very same thing you call a reason for living can flip and become an excellent reason for dying. That's what makes this so incredibly urgent.
So what is it that even gets us to this crisis point? What makes us ask this question in the first place? Well, Camus says it all starts with a feeling, this kind of strange, sudden disconnect from the world that he calls the absurd. It's that moment where you suddenly feel like a total stranger in your own life. He has this amazing phrase for it. He says the stage sets collapse. You're just going through the motions on your commute, at your desk, and then out of nowhere, the question just hits you, why? Why am I doing this? And suddenly you're aware that time is just dragging you forward. The world feels weird and alien. You look at other people and they just seem like robots. And then it hits you. The cold, hard fact that you are going to die. That's the absurd knocking on your door. Now, here's the absolute key to understanding this. The absurd isn't just in your head, and it's not just a feature of the world. It's born from the clash between the two. On one side, you've got us, humanity, with this desperate, deep-down need for things to make sense. We want answers. And on the other side, you've got the universe, which just meets all our questions with what Camus perfectly calls an unreasonable silence. So this is the official definition. The absurd isn't a thing. It's a relationship. It's a confrontation. It only exists because both sides are there, us needing meaning and the world refusing to give it. It's like an equation, human need versus worldly silence. If you take away either side of that equation, the whole thing just falls apart.
And this brings us right back to the central problem, the big question. Okay, so we get it. We accept that this painful, absurd situation is the truth of our lives. So what now? Does logic itself demand that we just end it all? Is suicide the only logical way out?
Now, before he gives his own answer, Camus takes a look at how other thinkers have tried to wiggle out of this problem. And he basically sees all their solutions as a kind of cop-out, an escape he calls philosophical suicide.
He calls their main tactic the leap. It's what happens when a philosopher follows the logic all the way to the edge of the absurd. But then, at the very last second, they just take a giant leap of faith into something eternal or hopeful to make the problem go away. So the logic of this leap kind of works like this. First, you see the problem clearly. You recognize the absurd conflict. Then, you basically decide one side has to be wrong, and it's almost always our own human reason. So you toss it out. In its place, you elevate the other side, the irrational, the silent universe, and you call it God. And just like that, the very thing that was causing you despair is now your source of hope and salvation.
But for Camus, this is just not honest. It's a betrayal of the truth you just worked so hard to uncover. For him, the real challenge, the real courage, is to stay right there on that razor's edge, to live with that tension, and to refuse to explain it away by jumping into the comforting arms of faith.
So Camus completely rejects that escape. If we can't take the leap, then what's the alternative? He says we have to learn to live without appeal. meaning without looking to God or an afterlife for comfort. And when you bravely accept that, he says 3 powerful consequences naturally follow. The first one is revolt. Now, we're not talking about a political revolution here. This is a constant internal rebellion against our human condition. It's the act of staring your fate, death, meaninglessness, right in the face day after day and refusing to just passively accept it. You keep the absurd alive through your defiance. The second consequence is freedom. And this one might sound a little strange at first. By accepting that there's no grand plan, no eternal reward or punishment waiting for you, you're suddenly free from the chains of hope in the future. You become totally, radically free to act right here in the present. And that leads us to the third one, passion. If this is the only shot you get, the only life you have, then the goal becomes to live it as fiercely and as intensely as possible. It's about squeezing every last drop out of your experience, draining it all to the bitter end. So, you see how these 3 ideas work together? They're like the 3 legs of a stool holding up the absurd life. Revolt is what keeps you fighting. It's the total opposite of suicide. Freedom is what you get for giving up a future you never had anyway. And passion is how you respond to the fact that your time is limited.
Okay, so taken together these 3 things, revolt, freedom, and passion, they create an entirely new way of looking at life. A new set of ethics for the person Camus calls the absurd man.
And this quote right here, this is the absolute heart of it. This is a game changer. For centuries, philosophy was all about living the good life, the virtuous life. But the absurd man throws all that out. He's not interested in making value judgments. His goal is to maximize the quantity of his experience. It's about feeling as much as possible, not being the best person.
This table really makes the difference clear, doesn't it? The traditional way of thinking is always focused on the future, asking, how can I live well so I can get some reward later? But the absurd ethic? It flips that completely. It's rooted 100% in the present moment, asking, how much can I live right now? It trades some vague hope for real, concrete experience.
So the absurd hero is someone who is brutally honest with themselves. They use their brain to understand their limits. Number 1, you're going to die. But then they use their courage to say, okay, that fact isn't going to crush me. Instead, it becomes the fuel for living their own adventure, on their own terms, without needing anyone else's approval. I mean, just listen to that line. It's so powerful. The thing that seems like a curse, being stuck in this meaningless present with no way out, that's actually where you find your kingdom. By accepting it, by diving into it with passion and revolt, you become the ruler of your own life. And so, at the end of it all, Camus brings us back to a really personal challenge. He's made his case that life is absolutely worth living, not in spite of the fact that it's absurd, but because it's absurd. So the final question isn't whether we should live, but how. If this is really all there is, what are you going to do to make sure you're truly, passionately, and consciously alive for all of it?